You're now listening to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. Straightforward, no nonsense business advice. Completely unfiltered. Grow your business. Grow your life. Now, here's your host, Brian Fullerton.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. It's your host, Brian Fullerton here. And guys, today we have an exciting guest on the podcast with us. I'm actually a little nervous. And Garrett, I don't usually get nervous. So we have we have none other than Garret Sutton, who is one of the rich dad advisors to Robert Kiyosaki, an incredibly successful businessman in his own right with corporate direct and creating, LLCs and business entities and in the whole deal. And you are Robert Kiyosaki's corporate attorney. So I'm really excited about having you on our podcast, Garrett. I do not take your time for granted. Garrett, I'll tell you, it's really interesting. One of the most requested topics that we get is folks wanting to know about business creation, LLCs, DBAs. There's so much confusion. There's a lot of misinformation. So without running down the rabbit hole just yet, let's just slow down so we can speed up. Why don't you give everybody who maybe doesn't know who you guys are, maybe just your background and a little snapshot about who you are in your business?
Sure, Brian, and thanks for having me on. It's a great service you provide to your audience. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and went to the University of California at Berkeley, and then crossed the Bay and went to Hastings Law School, which is the University of California's law school in San Francisco. And I always liked corporate law, and I took that in law school. And then I decided to move up to Reno. I enjoy the winter skiing and the summers at Lake Tahoe. And so I really enjoy living in Reno, and Nevada is one of the good states for forming corporations and LLCs. So, I got married, raised a family here. And in the early 2000s, Brian, I became very fortunate to become associated with Robert Kiyosaki. And so we've traveled the world, not only the United States, but the world, talking about financial education. And, we were just in Singapore and Japan in October. Thank God it was October and not the last month. But
Sure.
we were, talking to audiences there about how they can take steps to improve their financial future. And this is a topic that's important to people around the world, not just in the United States. So it's been great working with Robert Kiyosaki and the other Rich Dad advisors to get the message out, and then to talk to people on your show, Brian, who want this information. Unfortunately, they don't teach it in schools.
Right.
You pretty much have to get it on your own. And so for the last 20 years, I wrote Start Your Own Corporation, Loopholes of Real Estate, other books in the Rich Dad Advisor series. So we're getting the information out there, and I look forward to talking to you today about some of the issues that your audience has. 100%.
Well, I super appreciate you jumping on the podcast. In fact, before we were hit the record button, we were catching up for just a few minutes, and absolutely, I've listened to and read all of your books, all the Kiyosaki books. You guys have changed my business, my life, my business mindset. Coming from a very poor, low income, kind of family and background, and we're on our way up a little bit. And I can't be any more honest with you to just tell you guys how much that all of your guys' books have helped us out. In fact, one of the reasons as well that we have you on the podcast is because I use your services. So we've created some new LLCs. We had to polish up and clean up some different things in the last 12, 18 months. And I've had such a positive experience. And so if you guys have ever wondered about how to form a business, DBAs versus LLCs, all the different kind of topics that are trendy buzzwords that when you start a business that, you don't really know all about, well, we're here to handle, hopefully, a bunch of those frequently asked questions. And like I said, Garrett, you've written 6 books. You have 30 plus years in doing this. And so you are a great authority figure on this topic. So I'm really excited about unpacking your story. So let's do this. Before we jump into it, I'm going to get a sip of water here. We'll hear from the announcements, and we'll unpackage your whole story.
Have you ever thought about starting your own lawn and landscaping business, but not sure where to start? Look no further than LawnTrepreneurAcademy.com, an e-training website dedicated to helping you start and grow a successful lawn care business. Save more time and make way more money by learning exactly what it takes to grow your business to the next level. Invest in your future by first investing in yourself. Use promo code PODCAST to save 10% on all training programs today at LawnTrepreneurAcademy.com. Now, back to the show.
All right. Well, hey, Garrett, let me ask you this. Before we start going down all these technical questions and the X's and O's, right? Almost all of your guys' books start off with a really good kind of a story about history. And I always find this fascinating, right? Usually a lot of the stories in your books and Robert's books talk about how corporate entities even came to exist. And so, here's the deal. When we're starting lawn and landscape companies, we're always out front, right? We're excited about cutting grass, doing landscaping jobs, doing the whole deal. But we run businesses, and we have to make sure that we're taking care of the back end of the business first, or as well. So let's talk about this. Can you give us maybe a brief history of entities and why all this exists and why the law is so different when you're starting up a business with these different type of entities?
Sure, be happy to. Entities go back to the Roman Empire. Even the Romans knew that they had to be able to protect their assets, be able to transfer assets upon, the father's death, and so they created trusts and entities for people during the Roman Empire times to move forward with their business. And then, you had the collapse of Western civilization, and, things started to come back in the 1400s. And at that point, up until then, business activity wasn't as great. But in the 1400s, especially with exploration, people wanted to be able to pursue opportunities, but not have to go to debtor's prison, which they had, if you made a mistake or if things didn't work out. So the English government, the Crown, started chartering companies for people to pursue opportunities. And it was kind of an inside thing. You had to know the king and kiss his foot to get the charter. But it allowed people to send a ship out to pursue commercial opportunities. And if the ship sank, the promoter back in England didn't have to go to debtor's prison because everything was lost. He had a chartered company that was responsible for the loss. And this really aided in economic development, the idea of limited liability entities. And so the Crown in England and other countries in Europe decided, we should allow a lot of people to have corporate entities. We want to encourage economic activity, so we're going to allow for corporations. And so that's when they really got started again, was in the 1500s.
Okay.
And now you have states that realize that people not only need these limited liability entities, but they want to have the best possible law for them. And the states of Nevada, Wyoming, and Delaware compete against each other to have the best laws, which is great for us as entrepreneurs. We want to have states that provide us with the best protection possible. So that's kind of the brief history. It is an interesting history.
Well, let me ask you this. What is asset protection? What like you're talking about these corporations that are formed. What was the benefit for the person creating them, and what's the role for them to exist? For example, as you can imagine where I'm going with this one is, you're not personally sometimes tied to the business. You're not personally liable. Could you expand on that a little bit so people understand how that makes sense in 2020?
Sure. So if you operate in your individual name, you have a lawn care business in your own name, and something bad happens at a job, you're personally responsible. That's who the homeowner was dealing with, was Joe Blow as an individual. They have a claim against Joe. They sue Joe. He does not have a corporation protecting him. So all of Joe's assets are at risk. The equity in his house, his personal bank account, all the business assets, the mowers and the cars and the trucks, all of that is at risk when Joe gets sued as an individual. If Joe uses an LLC to do business and there's a claim, and Joe hasn't been, willful in his harm. I mean, if you act in a willful manner, like you're intentionally trying to hurt someone, you can be held personally responsible, even if you have an LLC. But no one does that. I mean, it's just an accident that happens, and you're going to have insurance. But insurance companies don't cover every claim. They're in business to make money.
Sure.
So you want the insurance as the first line of defense. You want these entities, Brian, as the second line of defense. So that if you get sued on a job and insurance doesn't cover it, or the claim exceeds the insurance, the person suing has to sue the LLC. That's who they did business with. They can get what's inside the LLC, the trucks and the mowers, but they can't go through the LLC. They can't go past the LLC to get at your personal assets, your brokerage account, the equity in your house, your savings account. So that's why it's really important for people to realize that these LLCs are there for your benefit. The state governments in every state allow people to protect themselves with LLCs.
Right.
There's nothing questionable about this. State governments allow you to do this because it's in the best interest of the economy and society for people not to be personally responsible all the time. So these are the reasons why you do it.
And that kind of spurs, economic growth. Well, it does spur economic growth. And, we're a very pro-business podcast. So we still believe in capitalism on Fullerton Unfiltered. So, and by the way, one other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that also limits your liability against your other businesses. Let's say you run a lawn and landscape company, but you have 4 apartment buildings, right? They can't just go after everything. Could you expand on that? Is that true?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. In that context, you could have an LLC that runs your lawn care business, and then you would have real estate properties. You could put it in the same LLC. Here's the risk, though. If you get sued on the business, the apartment buildings are in that one LLC, so the person suing could reach the apartment building. So we want to segregate assets. You'll have an LLC for the lawn care business. Then you'll have separate LLCs for your real estate, so that if a tenant sues on a building, they would sue the LLC that they rent from, but that doesn't give them the ability to reach into the lawn care business. That's in a separate LLC.
Sure.
So we do want to segregate assets.
Well, and there's a whole nother 2 oars in the water. One is the corporate entity side. And by the way, I'm learning all of this through you guys and using all your services. And the other oar in the water is also for tax strategy. That's
right.
A whole nother conversation. And Garrett, selfishly, one day I want to try to get Tom Wheelwright on the podcast, right? Because you want to talk about...
Well, he'd get on.
Yeah, sure. He's a plethora.
But let me mention one advantage of being an LLC versus doing business in your own name.
Sure.
You have a 5 times greater risk of an audit if you operate in your own name or as a sole proprietor. Just by having that LLC, the IRS respects the fact that you understand that there are risks in business. You've taken steps to form an LLC, and the audit risk is much lower than if you do business on your own or in your own name. The IRS would look at a sole proprietor and say, well, why aren't they operating through an LLC? And if they're not operating through an LLC, maybe they're fudging their books. And it's just easy pickings for the IRS to go after sole proprietors that operate their own business. You're just much better off, not only from a liability perspective, as we mentioned, but from an audit risk perspective, you're much better off operating through an LLC.
You're referring to running it through your own name as a DBA, right?
Yeah.
Can you maybe expand on that? I know it might be extremely simple, but a DBA is how a lot of guys get started in business.
Yeah, so a DBA stands for doing business as. So you're a sole proprietor, and so we mentioned Joe Blow is going to start Joe's Lawn Care. So Joe would receive a check made out to Joe's Lawn Care. And he can't deposit that check into his personal bank account because it's Joe Blow.
Mm-hmm.
So you file the DBA with the county that says, I'm doing business as an individual under this new name, Joe's Lawn Care.
Okay.
And then then you go to the bank with that filing, and they'll let you cash checks in the name of Joe's Lawn Care. That's all a DBA is. It doesn't offer any asset protection like an LLC.
Gotcha. Which again, like you said, makes you extremely capable of being sued and a lot of liability issues. So I just think it's fascinating conversation. Like this is stuff that, to go full circle, they did not teach me back in high school, right? we were
Unfortunately not. I think kids should learn this in the senior year of high school or at some point during high school.
Well, Garrett,
this is all information that everybody needs.
Well, we're busy learning the quadratic formula. We don't have time for this. So,
yeah, the quadratic equation. When was the last time you used that?
Yeah, or trigonometry, right? That's what I always say to these young guys. It's funny. We went and purchased a $58,000 truck. We put some cash down and financed the rest. It was for the business, right? And it's funny, and you guys make the same analogy all the time in your books, but when I walked into my banker's office, they didn't ask me for my report card from 2002. So I said, well, wait a minute, I had a 3.5 GPA. And they said, what are you talking about? They said, let's see your P&L, and let's see your numbers and your 3 C's, right? As we call it. And so anyway, I just, you and I are kindred spirits. I totally can relate. Let me ask you this. With your macro perspective on doing so many different business owners, corporate entities and structures, can you maybe just run down the list for us of the different entities and maybe like strengths and weaknesses? It might be a little redundant, but I get a lot of people saying, well, I'm a DBA and I'm an LLC. I'm an LLC S Corp. Which will probably, parlay into the next question about different election status. But, there's LLCs, there's LLPs. Could you spend a few minutes talking about all these different entities out there?
Sure. So as we mentioned earlier, the original entity was the corporation. Mm-hmm. And, they've been around for 500 years. Then the English system allowed for limited partnerships, whereby you have a general partner who's personally responsible, and then limited partners are limited to the amount they put into the limited partnership. So if you invest $10,000 as a limited partner and the LP gets sued, all you can lose is your $10,000. They're not coming after you personally.
Okay.
So the LLC is the same way. The LLC started recently. It was only created in Germany about 100 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it spread. It was so popular because it's kind of like an incorporated partnership whereby you have limited liability protection, but you also have partnership benefits. Mm. So the LLC is a new entity, and it started in Germany as the GmbH, and it expanded throughout the world. And these two Wyoming wildcatters, oil guys, discovered it down in South America. Mm. And they thought, what a great entity. And so they brought it back to the state of Wyoming. And Wyoming was the first state to offer the LLC. These Wyoming wildcatters lobbied the Wyoming legislature, which is, really buying drinks for people. And they got the LLC promoted.
Okay.
And it was so popular that it spread to all 50 states within a matter of years.
Wow.
So we really like the LLC because you have that limited liability, and the IRS came out and said you can be taxed however you want through an LLC. You can be taxed as a C Corp. You can be taxed as an S Corp. If you're the sole owner of it, you can be a disregarded entity where everything flows onto your return. I mean, there's just a lot of flexibility with the LLC.
I love it.
And like the limited partnership, the LLC has what's called in the good states, the charging order protection. And that's a key asset protection feature. Maybe we'll get into it.
I'd love to.
But yes. The LLC, when you compare everything, offers a great deal of flexibility for taxation and asset protection if you ever get sued. So that's why we like the LLC.
Well, there's a huge thing that I wanted to clear up some misinformation for sure on this podcast, just from taking advice from your uncle or your brother-in-law, right? There's a difference between being an LLC and being an LLC taxed as an S corp, right? Different election status. So when some people are like, "Well, I'm an LLP or I'm a C corp," can you maybe just expand on that for a few more minutes? Maybe any high level strengths or weaknesses for both, because of course we want to always say go get with your local CPA, your lawyer, whatever. So we're just trying to keep it broad here. But if you want to reach out to Garrett and his folks, we'll make sure to take care of that by the end of this. But can you talk about how the different election status works for the different companies?
Yeah, the C corp, you're going to be taxed as a C corp, right? If you form a corporation and you don't do anything else, you're taxed as a C corp, and that has double taxation. There's a tax at the corporate level. Then you make distributions to the shareholders, and they're taxed again. So one of the downsides of the C corp is the double taxation, but it has its merits. There are times when you use a C corp. If you're growing and you're not going to make distributions, you may want to use a C corp. Or if you're going to go public, you pretty much have to be a C corp. The S corp is a corporation, and you make an election. You file Form 2553 with the IRS, and the S corp says we want to be taxed as a partnership. And so you make the election, you have less than 100 shareholders, and the S corp election says, okay, we're going to not pay tax at the corporate level like the C corp, but we're going to pay tax like a partnership. We're going to let it flow through to the owners of the S corp. Now, the advantage of the S corp, and this is why a lot of your listeners, Brian, are going to use it.
Sure.
When they talk to their CPA or whoever. The S corp taxation allows us to minimize payroll taxes. And payroll taxes are what we contribute for Social Security and Medicare. And, if you're under 40, there's a good chance you're not going to see that money. So we want to minimize payroll taxes. You got to pay it. You get in trouble if you don't pay the payroll taxes. But, when you're an employee, they take out 6 or 7.65% for payroll taxes. They also take out the same amount from the business, right? So if you own your business and you're the employer and the employee, you're paying both halves of that. You're paying 15.3% to the IRS for those darn payroll taxes.
I love it.
We don't want to pay, we don't want to pay that 15.3% on every dollar of income we bring in.
Sure.
So you pay yourself a reasonable salary, and you pay the 15.3% on that. Then you make distributions at the end of the year because of the profit you made, and you don't have to pay the 15.3% on your distributions. You still pay ordinary income tax.
Sure.
They get you both ways, but you're not paying that 15.3%. So working with your CPA, having an LLC taxed as an S corporation will give you asset protection, and you'll be able to minimize your payroll taxes with that election.
It's huge to be just totally blunt. It's a huge savings. Like we actually, my CPA Garrett fired me, my old CPA, about a year and a half ago, and he was an older gentleman. He was on his way out. I knew he was retiring, but I was always just kind of milking it for one extra year, right? And because of my lawn and landscape company, and then we do all this YouTube stuff where we had to fill out or create a new entity. It honestly, he was just done. He was exhausted from the industry. He was like that small town CPA, right? And then I used a new CPA through the Wealth Ability Network, one of Tom's referrals, and we've been working with you guys the last 12, 18 months, and it's just funny because my personal CPA, Michael, he just from changing a couple different things, like you just said, the way the entity's formed up, the way we take payroll and our election status, it literally saved $15,000 in 2019.
Yeah.
And I will totally tell you this, that in full disclosure, I wrote 2 checks on April 15th or 17th, whatever it was this time last year, to pay, we paid quarterlies the whole way. And then he's like, well, congratulations, you owe this, this, and this. And it was a large check with a comma in it. And I was furious. And then, I was paying my first quarterlies. And so like April 17th, I just remember coming home and my wife was like, what's up with you? And I'm like, well, I just paid, a mega, I bought a new car for somebody, and, and that was, I was, but, I didn't know this stuff, and, since then we're getting all of our quote unquote ducks in a row. And if you're listening to this and you're like, man, LLC and DBA and, it kind of sounds a little nauseating and kind of if you don't go to school for this, it's kind of tough. It is initially, but I will tell you, it's just like when you learn a new board game. Like initially, it's tough, it's frustrating. Like everybody else knows the language, knows the lingo. They're doing really, really good, and they're navigating the waters like no problem. And when you're the new guy, on new topics, especially something about, LLCs and DBAs and corporate structure, right?
Right.
It does get a little confusing, but, what I've done is, hey, Garrett, this might be a stretch, but have you ever heard of, Monopoly and like the game like Catan and these kind of board games?
Mm-hmm.
So
Monopoly, certainly.
So there's a board game out there, and I use this analogy because it really helps a lot of folks, but there's a board game called Catan, and, I found one day I got my butt handed to me playing that game with some friends, and I went in, turned into a nerd, and I said, well, I'm going to go on YouTube and watch Catan strategy sessions, about how to get better at this board game. And my wife was like, what are you watching at 10:30 at night on YouTube? I'm like, I'm watching Catan strategy videos. And she's like, are you for real? And I said, yeah. And so I had this like little newsletter. I even subscribed to this one guy. It's so silly. It's so unbelievable. But I found myself like trying to be better at Catan. Well, the exact same thing happened with me and my businesses the last 12, 18 months. This was so foreign to me that I knew I had to go deep. I had to, use Tom's services and his training programs. Lisa, with your company, I was emailing her back 50 times. I apologize in advance, Lisa. And, but I wanted to learn this stuff because I didn't want to just operate with my head in the sand. You know what I mean? And so, if you're not familiar with this kind of topic, no big deal. Take the next 12 months, listen to some good podcasts. I know, Garrett, you have tons of content out there on Instagram and YouTube and, different podcasts with Robert and everybody else. You have a plethora of information in all your books. And that's why I just say that if this is all new to you and you're kind of stressing out or freaking out, hey, no big deal. I was the exact same boat. Let alone 10, 12 years ago, 3-4 years ago. And so, right. Well, let me ask you this. As we keep this conversation going, can you, I don't have any super formal questions here, but I have some things that I know people always ask me. And some of them I'm sure you can answer, or if you want to pass, that's fine too. But one thing is the topic of like quarterly taxes, like if you're, can you explain what quarterly taxes are and who should be paying them, why they should be paying them, or in a different route, if you're setting up a company in a different way, you're not paying quarterly taxes, but you're paying it out of payroll. Could you maybe answer that elusive question? That's a big one for my industry.
Sure. Well, the quarterly taxes are there because the IRS wants to make sure that you're not surprised at the end of the year. They want to get the taxes quarterly. Mm-hmm. And so I always recommend that you work with a good bookkeeper at the very least. And this is one of Robert Kiyosaki's huge messages is that you need to work with a bookkeeper at the very start. You may not think that you can afford one, but having a bookkeeper keep track of everything for you and making sure that you're paying all the payroll taxes and all the quarterlies is really, it takes a load off the business owner. And you don't need to become an expert in this stuff. Have the bookkeeper do the work for you. And so, that is a key thing to do when you're building your business. You're better off going out and finding new clients and providing services rather than spending hours keeping the books. So you want to have that person on your team. And business is a team sport. You want to have the bookkeeper, the CPA, the attorney, I think it's important to have a banker, to have someone at the bank that you can talk to. I know there's huge turnover now, but some of the banks have private banking, and you should establish a relationship with a banker in your community. There may be times when you need a loan, and that banker knowing you and knowing your financial situation can give you a loan if you're in a tough spot.
Well, what about?
So these are all important to have. And I wanted to get back to one thing, Brian, that you mentioned was two things actually. Our content, all of the Rich Dad Advisor books, are on audiobook, and a lot of people take in information just while they're driving around. And I certainly do. I love the audiobook. So we do have content there. The other thing, LLC versus DBA, you were mentioning that, Brian. And, the DBA is where you're operating by yourself. The LLC is where you formed a company and you're operating under a company. And as you were saying, it's kind of confusing to people. We didn't learn about it ever before. But here's one way to remember it. The DBA is going to cost you probably $5,000 to $10,000 more in taxes than the LLC. Wow. If you operate as the sole proprietor, all that income is subject to payroll taxes, that 15.3%. If you operate as an LLC taxed as an S Corp, we can minimize those payroll taxes, and we can save you $5,000 to $10,000 a year every single year, just like your experience, Brian, with the new CPA. So while it may seem complicated, there's a really great silver lining at the end of it, and that is saving thousands of dollars in taxes every year.
Totally. Well, it's funny. One line that I've said on my podcast many times is there's a difference between evasion and avoidance, and we clearly do not want to evade. But I, have no problem working hard behind the scenes, and same as my CPA, to minimize the amount of taxes that we owe, because that's my money. And I would like to keep it working for me, as Robert calls them. If you have $10,000 in the bank, that's 10,000 employees that you want working for you, right? And so, I love it. Well, one thing I wanted to kind of come back to. We'll take a quick break here. I'm going to get a sip of water, but I wanted to see. If you got a few more minutes, I want to talk about forming structure these entities, like how to create them. There's different services. There's the legal Zooms, and there's all these different. If you Google set up an LLC, I'm sure you get 2.1 million search results in 0.05 seconds, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of confusion out there, a lot of misinformation. So you got one of the authorities here in the industry, creating corporate entities, which is yourself. And I really do want to maybe talk about that for the next 10, 15 minutes, because that's another hot topic question that I get from my fans. So let's do this. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. We'll hear from the announcements again, and we'll get right back into it.
Enjoying today's show? Motivated to take your lawn care and landscaping business to the next level? Learn what it takes to grow your lawn and landscaping business today with training and education from the Lawntrepreneur Academy. Get educated with how-tos on mulch installation, plowing snow, aeration and overseeding, and so much more. These training programs are designed to help you save time and make more money with your business. Invest in your future by first investing in yourself. Use promo code PODCAST to save 10% on all courses today at LawnTrepreneurAcademy.com. Now, back to the show.
All right. Well, Garrett, one question that I get a lot is, should I set up an LLC? Should I set up a DBA? How much do they cost? I literally get this question every single day. So hopefully you're able to help a lot of people out with this podcast. Let me ask you this. Just like when you hire a bookkeeper, right? Like, this is with all due respect, more than likely your mom is not a good bookkeeper, just so people know. They didn't go to school for bookkeeping. They're not a professional bookkeeper, so on and so forth. Well, same thing as yourself or your brother-in-law or your uncle that says he knows how to file paperwork with the LLC at the state level. Maybe he might. But you might also want to look at a professional service. So, let me ask you this. Can you explain the process of creating an LLC or a new entity and what it goes through? And then, the 1-2 punch is, what's the difference between a corporate direct and like a legal Zoom or these online expedited services, if you don't mind?
Sure. So the process is you're going to you've listened to this show. You realize you need an entity, probably an LLC taxed as an S corp for lawn care, and then just an LLC taxed as a partnership for real estate properties. So you need it, and so you will consult with someone, an attorney, our staff, whoever. About it. And once you decide which entity you're going to choose, then you file the articles of organization for an LLC with the state. And then a lot of people will offer that service, but nothing more. For $99, they'll file the articles and say you're done, but you're not done at all. You're only about 30% done at that point.
It's huge.
You need an operating agreement. You need the minutes of the first meeting. You need to issue the membership certificates. You need to get an EIN number so you can open a bank account in the name of the LLC. So we provide that service, and we charge a flat fee of $695. But if you mention, and then the filing fees are on top of that, they vary from state to state. But if you mention Fullerton Unlimited, Fullerton Unfiltered, rather.
Yeah.
If they mention your service, Brian, you get $100 off. So it's $595 for the whole package, and then the state filing fees are on top of that. And we provide the whole package. You get to talk to someone. You get to have a operating agreement tailored for your specific situation. We don't give you a form and tell you to fill it in. We fill it in, and it's done. You sign it, and it's done. If the IRS ever comes calling on a surprise audit, they want to see this stuff. You really need to have this paperwork in order. And then another important factor in all this is you have to keep your corporate veil in place. You have to follow the formalities for corporations and LLCs so you stay protected. And we help you with that, too, on an ongoing basis. It's not enough just to set up the entity and you're done. You need to file every year with the state. You need to do minutes of a meeting every year, and we assist people with that. So it's not an expensive proposition. It's an expense to the business. So, this is something you can write off as a business expense. And, Brian, it's another form of insurance.
Sure.
All of your listeners are going to have liability insurance. These LLCs are another form of insurance, and they will protect your personal assets from being exposed to a claim.
So when you're talking about forming an LLC, of course, there's a lot of expedited services that are like $99 for LLC formation, right? And then you start adding on these supplemental services, and
right.
95 times out of 100, this is the case. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but this is one of the reasons I wanted to have from the horse's mouth, as they say, talk about this, is because all these different services exist, and I know there's some good ones out there. So I'm not throwing everybody all under the rug here in lumping them together, but when you are trying to form an LLC, it's like LLCs for $99 in Connecticut or your state, right? And then you add the operating agreement, you add the minutes and all these other services. Well, then it's like $995 or $795, and and in fact, that's one of the reasons I went with you guys, because yours is a flat rate fee to essentially create this, plus the filing fees for that state. Can you expand a little bit? I know this might be a little bit more of a 202 topic, but where you file and create your companies does have different advantages, like you were alluding to earlier. If somebody runs a lawn and landscape business, would they run or form, I should say, that company in state, or would they create things out of state? How would that work for our audience? Just curious.
Well, at a basic level, you would form in the state where you're operating.
Sure.
Right? When you have an entity that has a lot of assets in it, i.e. real estate, we recommend that you buy a fourplex in Utah. You would have a Utah LLC on title to the Utah fourplex. And then we like to have, then you buy a property in Oregon. So you have an Oregon LLC on title to the Oregon property. And then we would have the Oregon and Utah LLCs, both owned by one Wyoming LLC. The risk comes if you get in that horrific car wreck and they want to get at your assets from the outside attack. The inside attack is where someone sues your business or sues because they fell on the property. That's the inside attack. They have a direct claim against the business. But the outside attack is when you get in a car wreck or someone falls on your property.
Okay.
And they want to get your assets from the outside. When they have to fight through a Wyoming LLC, it's very difficult. All they get is what's called the charging order, as we mentioned before. And the charging order is really a lien on distribution. So the person that was in the car wreck can get a lien on your distributions from the Wyoming LLC, but you may not make any distributions. They may be sitting around waiting. And I always recommend that people have enough insurance. And for personal, you can have your home, your personal residence, and your autos, typically with one company, say State Farm, and you can ask for an umbrella policy of insurance. And for, an extra $1 million in coverage, it's only $400 a year. And so that is good insurance. The attorneys know how to get at that kind of insurance when you get in the car wreck. And if they can get at the insurance, they're going to leave you alone on these LLCs because it's not a good use of their time. They're on a contingency fee. They get a percentage of what they collect. And for them to go to Wyoming and get a charging order in Wyoming and monitor it, it's not a good use of their time. So when we have umbrella policy insurance for your personal activities, you're going to have insurance for your lawn care business. You're going to have insurance on the real estate you own. By having these LLCs in place, you're going to have a great deal more protection than you would if you operated everything in your individual name.
I love it.
So to get back to your question, if you're doing a lawn care business in Texas, I would just use a Texas LLC. We're not going to hold a lot of assets in that LLC, right? You're going to have the equipment and the mowers and all, but you're not going to have a piece of real estate in there. When we start doing real estate and valuable assets, that's where we like to plug in the Wyoming LLC.
Gotcha. Well, and again, this might sound a little 202, but I'm actually physically excited. I love talking about this stuff. If you could see me, I'm rocking in my chair because this is stuff. This is. Can I just be honest? This is how wealthy people operate. I just want to be totally clear. This is what the wealthy and the rich do. And I want to be rich. I want to be wealthy. I think more is better than less. And whether wealthy to you is running $100,000 a year lawn and landscape company, or you want to take those earnings over the next 30 years and invest into creating a real estate empire. Awesome. That's absolutely something that I intend to do. I mean, I want, I've learned from Robert Kiyosaki that I take earned income, I buy assets. Assets create passive income, and passive income pays for my lifestyle and my doodads, right? And so there's this mega flow chart that if you've never read the Rich Dad Poor Dad books or the Cash Flow Quadrant, two of the most transformational, foundational, formative books I've ever read. I got a friend put those both in my hands at 18 years old. And in a lot of books are, Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's what the wealthy teach their kids and what the poor middle class don't. And these are the things that the reason I get so excited about these topics and passionate, and I want to pay it forward to all of you guys listening, is because I didn't know this growing up. And I'll be honest, yes, I came from way far back, but even if you're middle class or upper middle class, there's a 95% chance that you didn't have these conversations either. But the wealthy, this is what they teach their kids. This is what the wealthy do to protect themselves and to grow their companies. And if you aspire to, and by the way, here's one thing I'll say: wealthy doesn't mean Donald Trump and Jeff Bezos. Okay, wealthy could be $500,000 a year, and you're already in that top 1% in the U.S. Yeah. So don't think that as you listen to this, well, that doesn't apply to me. No, you have to start taking care of the back end, like you said, CYA, cover your assets, right, Garrett? So right. There's other corporate terms for CYA, but I think it's here we're talking about covering your assets, and so that's one thing that you need to pay good money and have good professionals helping you behind the scenes put this diagram, this organization of your life and your businesses together. That's something that Liz and I have had to do the last 12, 18 months as we formed a new company. Now we have all these moving parts and different entities. So this is really fresh and really just personal to me to make sure that if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm starting a lawn care business, I'm going to go get a DBA. Maybe, I understand. That's how I started. But also, you guys know I didn't start the most correct way 10, 12 years ago. And so, I really appreciate the insight. Can I ask you one other question while I got you, Garrett? Just to be respectful of your time. We got about another 10 minutes, and then I want to make sure that I'm respecting your calendar. But when one other term I hear a lot, and you've already alluded to it, was the charging order, but piercing the corporate veil. Can we talk about about 5 minutes here, like a worst case scenario? Like what is a charging order? Let's say something does happen. I know you kind of danced on it a little bit earlier, but what is that worst case scenario if you have these umbrella policies, and what does piercing the corporate veil mean?
Okay, well, two issues. The piercing of the veil is where you don't follow the corporate formalities. You don't follow what LLCs and corporations have to do every year to stay protected.
Okay.
So let's say that you don't pay your money to the state. The state is going to say, why should we give you this limited liability protection if you're not going to pay us? So they revoke your charter. When the charter's revoked and someone sues the corporation, they can pierce the veil and say, Joe didn't follow the formalities. He didn't pay the state. He didn't do his minutes. We're going to go after Joe personally. So piercing the veil is where the corporation doesn't follow the ongoing formalities, and the person suing the corporation sees that the corporation is empty. They can't collect from the corporation. So they go to court and they say, well, Joe didn't follow the formalities. We want to have a judgment against Joe. And in 50% of all cases, Brian, the corporate veil is pierced.
Wow.
It's amazing. People are not following the formalities. It's not hard to follow the formalities, but if you don't, it's pretty dramatic. You become personally responsible for everything. Now, you've set up the entity to have this protection, and by failing to follow the formalities, it's all lost.
Wow.
So we help people on an annual basis make sure that their corporate veil is in good standing.
Well, it's almost like their hobby, like that's how the state would look at it. Or I don't know if hobby is the exact term, but it's almost like if you're just kind of pussyfooting around this whole business and you're not treating it serious, well, then why do you need this formation?
You're a scofflaw.
Yes.
Right, you're a scofflaw. You're not following the law. And then on the charging order, we mentioned that when you get sued in the car wreck attack and they want to get at your assets, they want to get into your lawn care business, they want to get into your real estate, they can't if we have the right state. Wyoming, Nevada, and Delaware are all good. But Wyoming, Wyoming is only $50 a year to the state of Wyoming. And they don't list your name on the state website, so you have some privacy there, too.
Interesting.
We like Wyoming for those reasons.
Yeah. That's a really important one that I wanted to just dance on for a second because, for guys like us, when we have a commercial trailer, a utility trailer with some mowers on it, pulling our truck, and it's got a bunch of signage on it, but then, you don't have DOT numbers or you don't have a medical card. Well, you're like, well, I'm only doing this part-time. Well, yeah, but the state law or the state trooper is going to say, well, you have all this commercial signage on it. So technically you're operating under that commercial vehicle umbrella, right? And so now you're subject to that scrutiny. Is that kind of what you're saying, like in parallel?
Yeah, exactly right.
Well,
Can I give your listeners one strategy for how they can use their business to get into real estate?
Sure, 100%.
Okay. So you're running the lawn care business and you're operating through an LLC and, you've grown and you need to have a yard. It'd be nice to have a fenced yard and a little office in the yard. Well, you could put you could buy that. You have to pay rent to someone, right? So why not pay rent to yourself? So you buy the yard and we put it in a separate LLC. And the business has to pay rent to someone. If it's not you, it's going to be some other landlord. So let's say you have to pay $2,000 a month for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you buy the yard, put it in a separate LLC. The business pays the new yard holding LLC $2,000 a month. That's an expense to the business, right? It's got to pay rent to someone.
Mm-hmm.
So the business pays $2,000 to the new yard holding LLC, and you're using your business, you're using pre-tax dollars, because this is an expense to the business. You're using pre-tax dollars to buy yourself a piece of real estate. And this is how a lot of business owners start buying real estate, by using their business to buy that first piece of property.
That's huge. That's huge. Well, what if somebody, this is a selfish question, what if somebody had a personal residence and they had like a pole barn or a garage or a shed or a storage locker or something like that? Does that qualify or anything like that? This is just a off the cuff question.
Yeah, I mean, you could, but you just,
it just depends.
There are issues with, it depends. I mean, there's zoning issues you have to be aware of. Sometimes you can't split up a parcel. The best way to do it is to have the yard in a separate parcel away from the house, and a separate situation. So there are factors where it can be done, but it's you'd have to talk to a professional in your city about that.
Sure, fair enough. I just curious. I'm not saying I'm building or buying, but we're probably going to be building and buying, and I'm looking at every strategy as we talk about possible under the sun.
Yeah, if possible, when you buy, make sure that you can split the parcel and have the parcel that runs the business under one APN number, and that parcel would be in the LLC. Then your house could be in your individual name, and you could put a homestead on it and protect the equity in your house that way. A lot of this information is in my book, Start Your Own Corporation.
Yes. I listen to all these once a year on my Audible app, and I'm listening to tax strategy, wealth strategy stuff. It's to be honest with you, a lot of it's like 202 and 303 type of content to me. But I'm like, the biggest part of like even doing a podcast like this is to what I call get the conversations started. I think so many folks, they don't know, or they have wrong info, which is even worse. And that's one of the things I want to do is to at least get these conversations going. So if folks choose to use your guys' services, awesome. I encourage you guys to do. We just literally went through the whole mill this last summer, and you guys just did a great job. I mean, it was literally as simple as one could imagine, and everybody on your team did an amazing job. And then it's funny because I'm working with the same, Kiyosaki's partners teams and all the you guys behind the scenes, and it was just such a smooth, seamless transition. And one, I just wanted to kind of do a little case study, little testimony study for myself. Like, hey, is this all on the level? And as my life gets bigger, it's I need help. Building a team behind the scenes, like Robert talks about. Let me do this. Maybe just to wrap up here, just kind of open mic. Is there anything that you wanted to share with our audience, or any topical, frequently asked questions that you get, or things that people are constantly making mistakes on that you wanted to wrap this one up with, for a couple minutes? Totally open mic, any topics that you wanted to talk about.
Sure. So one of the key topics is when you take title to real estate, people will form the LLC to protect their real estate, the yard we talked about or other investment properties. They'll form the LLC, but then you have to take the additional step of transferring title from your name into the LLC. If you set up the LLC, but you don't transfer title into the name of the LLC, you don't have any protection. The title still shows you as the owner.
Gotcha.
So that's a frequently asked question, and I try and drive that home with all of my clients, that you have to take title in the name of the LLC to be protected. And then, as we mentioned, you just have to follow these formalities. 50% of the time, the veil is pierced, which means people aren't doing their minutes. They don't have a good registered agent to accept service of process, notice of a lawsuit. We provide the registered agent service in all 50 states. And when you get sued, we're on the phone to you immediately because in most cases, you only have 30 days to respond. So you got to get a lawyer and be ready to file an answer to the complaint. So, when we're your registered agent, we will, as soon as that service of process, the retired cop that comes and serves you with notice of a lawsuit at the registered agent's address, we're on the phone to you to let you know that you've been served and to, take steps to defend yourself.
Sure.
If you don't have a registered agent that is in business, there are a lot of mom and pops that come and go. If you haven't paid your registered agent and they have declined to represent you, then the process server goes and tries to serve the registered agent, and they say we don't provide that service for XYZ LLC. Then what happens is the process server goes back to the attorney and says we couldn't serve them. The attorney goes to the court and says to the judge, look, we tried to serve him, but we couldn't find him. And now the judge says, okay, well, you can publish notice of the lawsuit in the newspaper.
Wow.
And then, Brian, I'm sure you've seen the little 2-point type at the end of the newspaper, the legal notices. Those are notices of lawsuits. And you're not going to get notice of a lawsuit with that, right?
No.
I mean, they're going to publish. And then the attorney goes back to the judge and says, well, we put the notice in the newspaper and they didn't respond.
Okay.
And the judge says, okay, default judgment, meaning the other side has just won.
Wow.
So you don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure that you have a registered agent that's on your side and is going to notify you of a lawsuit. Because if you don't have a registered agent or they can't find you, they can get a default judgment against you, meaning they've won and you haven't had a chance to defend yourself.
Wow.
So the registered agent is really important. And we provide that service. It's included in the $595 the first year. And then it's $125 a year after that. And again, it's just another form of insurance.
And then again, just to clarify too, that's an extension of what you include in that rate, and something that the other guy might not even offer or mention to you when you're signing up with one of the expedited services online, right? And so,
and Brian, we've seen the horror stories where people, thought they had a registered agent, and this online service went out of business, and they don't have a proper registered agent, and they get a default judgment against them. It's not a good situation. So you want to work with someone who has been in business. And a lot of people will say, well, geez, I'll be my own registered agent. And what happens is some states require that you are open during regular business hours to accept service of process. If you're your own registered agent and you're off on a job, you're not going to get that notice, right? So it's better. And also, if you have a business where, clients come, you don't want the process server going to your place of business to serve you with notice of a lawsuit. It's embarrassing.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So
Sure.
You want to have a separate registered agent off-site that will take the service and notify you immediately.
Wow. Well, no, that a huge. I mean, this whole conversation should hopefully be able to help even the newest guy to the guy that's been around 10, 20 years and maybe doing millions, and hopefully everybody in between. I had a really quick question, just one little simple one. Let's say, and we'll wrap up with this one, but let's just say if somebody is wanting to start a lawn and landscape business, whether they're 18, 22, 25, 35, what if they don't have $600 to start with an LLC? Let's say they are trying to buy mowers, they're trying to buy a utility trailer, a weed whip, and so on, right? And money's tight.
Right.
Money's tight. They're trying to make $5,000 go where $10,000 should, right? That was my story.
Right.
So sometimes
here's what you do.
Yeah.
Here's what you do.
Go ahead.
People are starting out and they got to save every nickel, which is perfectly understandable. So you're going to start out as a sole proprietor, right? And you're going to bring money in and know that you're personally responsible for all this time you're a sole proprietor. As soon as you have enough money, you've got to get that LLC formed.
Okay.
You're going to save thousands of dollars in payroll taxes. You're going to protect yourself from being personally responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem, Brian, is people will get started as a sole proprietor and they get busy, right? And there's the crush of commerce. They just forget to go back and do the LLC. And so that's the real problem is that, people get started as sole proprietor. They're comfortable. They're doing business and they forget to do the LLC. But that's really important.
Yeah, no, that's huge. So, and that's one of those things too, where I love what you said, where the business just starts turning into a runaway freight train, right? And you forget to go back and what do they say? Cross your T's and dot your I's. And when usually you go back and fix a lot of these things. Here, I'm just going to be honest, is when you have a problem, and when you have a problem, by then it's usually too late. And I'm not trying to put the fear of God in anybody as you're listening to this, but the reason we're bringing this podcast out, early spring, is to still have these conversations now and to work on this before we hit, May, June, July, and we're all going 100 miles an hour, or it's summertime and we're all checked out because we want to go on the lake, right? So.
Right.
No, I super appreciate your time. Hey, one more time, just so everybody knows where they can find you. I'm definitely going to leave all your info in the show notes. And we did, I asked Garrett, I said, hey, I have a large audience that could absolutely benefit from your guys' services. We always joke, we have this promo code Garrett called Brian's 10, and it saves 10% on, I think, everything besides a Ford truck at this point. And so we're trying to save all of our fans and viewers money, and it's a fantastic thing that we're doing for the lawn care community. But to save $100 to create an LLC is huge. And I don't even know if I got a perk like that when I signed up with you guys, because I didn't care. I was like, look, Garrett, I need the help. I need to get this figured out. So, but where can people find you? We'll leave all this in the show notes. But if they want to follow more of Garrett and everything that you got going on, where can they find you and where can they find your company?
Well, our main website is corporatedirect.com, and you can sign up for a newsletter. We, talk about what's going on in the industry and all. We also offer a free 15-minute consultation with an incorporating specialist. So you can call and talk to someone and see if we can help you. And that number is 800-600-1760.
Okay.
So you can call up and say, 800-600-1760. Fullerton Unfiltered. I know that I'm entitled to a $100 discount, but let's talk about how you can help me. And so we'll be on the line with you for 15 minutes and see, if there's a fit there. So that's the best way to get in touch with us.
I love it. And by the way, that's not just for creating your lawn and landscape LLC. If there's other conversations and strategies and entities that you guys can offer, I know you guys do a lot with real estate and other businesses and of course, advice, I'm sure, and consulting and coaching. So there's always other services that I'm sure that you could provide to our audience for some of the guys at the bigger levels, right?
Well, and I'll get on the line with people. It's $175 for a half an hour, and we can talk about your strategy and what you have and what you may need. So I'm available to be on the phone as well. So
awesome.
We try and make it affordable and accessible for everyone.
I love it. Well, hey, knowing that we're just crossing the hour mark, I want to make sure that I don't get a hefty invoice in the mail. So, so that's pretty much all I've got. Any parting words that you want to leave everybody? Because if not, I super appreciate you and the time and all the services that you offer and the whole, Robert Kiyosaki family and team and everybody in between. It's just one day I'll be able to share the whole story, but you guys have just been tremendous. But is there anything else that I can do for you while we got you on the podcast?
Well, no, I'd just like to thank you, Brian, for getting this information out to people. As we've said numerous times on the show, they just don't teach this in school. You have to go out and get this information on your own. So kudos to you for, helping your industry understand all this.
Well, 100%. It goes full circle because 10, 12 years ago, I drew a line in the sand with my life and I said, one day I'm going to know these people. One day I'm going to inquire their help and their services. And you want to talk about a surreal experience. So Garrett, super appreciate you. Super appreciate your time. If folks need to get more information, like I said, we'll leave it in the show notes. But hey, Garrett, thanks so much for being a guest on the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. We appreciate you big time.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
All right, you bet. All right, hey guys. Well, thanks again for listening to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. If you guys haven't left a 5-star rating and review, we really appreciate that. Do me a quick solid on that one and just do a 5-star rating. And that's it, guys. We'll look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Fullerton Unfiltered.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast with Brian Fullerton. We hope you enjoyed this production. If so, please consider leaving us a 5-star review for the show. While the techniques and ideas presented here are designed to help you grow a more successful and profitable business, no one can guarantee these results for you. We want to emphasize that entrepreneurship is not easy, and the ideas presented here are just the opinions of Brian Fullerton and his respective guests. No one can guarantee success for you. That being said, we hope the ideas presented here help you and motivate you to go on out there and crush it with your own business.
Fullerton Unfiltered podcast.
Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode.